Anyways, hey guys.
Hi.
Most of you know who I am a little bit, but you might not know any more about me other than that I'm here and I play the cajon and that I go to church with you guys and up in Trinity and blah blah blah. So now you get to know a little more about me. It's interesting that this falls on the week where Joe is gone and Jason is not here, and so there's no one here older than I am. But that's okay. What's that? It means I have free reign. Tell me I did something wrong. So anyways, I have what could be a lot to talk about, so I'm going to try to go fast on the parts that are less interesting and then get to the cool parts. I'm Kevin. I grew up. What's that? I'm just starting right
Come
now.
closer.
Started coming.
Right here. It's coming back to me.
How do you pronounce your last name?
DeBoer.
DeBoer.
It's Dutch. Yeah. It means farmer, which my dad was in Iowa. He grew up on a farm there, which is an interesting fact to know. He moved to California when he was 18, and then, well, his dad and the whole family moved to California when he was 18. So he grew up on the farm, but then moved to California and went to engineering school, blah, blah, blah. My dad was a civil engineer until he retired a few years ago. Anyway. My dad has a big part in my testimony, as it will with most of you guys. With anyone, really, your parents have a big influence on you. So I'll start with my childhood and my parents and my relationship with them, because that's actually a big part of my testimony. I grew up just in the Bay Area, up in Concord, not very far from here, an hour and a half away. And lived here my whole life. I lived there my whole life until I moved to college in San Luis Obispo. Went there for 2 years, and then after that got a job here at Mount Hermon up in Felton, and I've been here for the last 2.5 years. If you guys have questions anytime, you can interrupt me, or you can stay to the end, whatever you want. That's fine. This is not really like a formal thing, so interact with me however you'd like. When I was growing up, I didn't know a lot about my parents, except for what I experienced from them. So I didn't know their testimonies either when I was growing up. And so now that I'm an adult looking back, things are a lot different. I'm like, oh, that's why my parents were like this, because they're actually insecure too. They're normal humans, blah, blah, blah. And once you kind of come to that realization, things change a lot. So as a kid, you have this view of your parents, and a lot of times it's wrong. Because you don't know them very well, and you don't know human beings very well, because you're pretty young. Growing up, I had this view of my parents like they were perfect, and that I needed to be exactly like they wanted me to be, et cetera, et cetera. And so my parents were actually really, really diligent about teaching. I'm one of 7 kids. I have 6 siblings, yeah. So I have 3 older siblings and 3 younger siblings. I'm right in the middle.
Dang.
Yeah.
Life sucks for you.
No, it's cool actually, because the 3 older are a little bit separated. There's 5-year gap between the upper 3 and then the lower 4. So I'm the oldest of the lower 4. So I have a little bit of that older child thing going on, whatever that means. But anyways, my parents were very diligent about trying to raise their children, teach their children, raise them in the way that they should go, kind of thing, teach them to be good Christian children. And neither of them really grew up Christian. So, my mom kinda, but they didn't really know what that meant, except for their own experience, just like all of us. And so for their generation, and then going into trying to raise their children differently, trying to raise their children kind of, better, have a better relationship with God than they did as kids. They tried as best they could to teach us as much as they could. And so they were very diligent about that. So we had devotions every single night where we all read together. And we sung out of a hymnal. Like, it was crazy. I wasn't homeschooled either. But from like as far back as I can remember, we read and had devotions every single night where my dad went through a passage, and then we all talked about it, and we all prayed, and we all sang hymns. And so it was ingrained in me early on. Scripture was just getting ingrained in me over and over again in the home as well as at church. And then when I got old enough, going to elementary and middle school, my parents were, again, very diligent. They sent all of their 7 kids through private Christian school, which I don't know how they did because it's expensive. But that was that was a big priority to my parents. And looking back, I'm extremely thankful because it was a huge blessing for us to get a really quality education and godly education, in a Christian environment at the same time. So I went to private Christian school and then private Christian high school, and was in that like Christian culture like quite a bit. I know. Do I act like it was one of those kind of kids? I don't know. Is there a stereotype? Is there a stereotype there? I don't know. Anyways, I know there's a stereotype for homeschool. Anyone was homeschooled? No? Anyone went to private Christian school? All right, sweet. Super tiny school. My middle school had like 20 to 25 people per class, like per grade. So I had like 20 classmates. And then in high school, there was 400 kids total, so 100 kids per class. Anyways, so growing up, like my parents were very diligent to try to have really good kids, and they taught their kids as much as they could to be good Christians. And for them, that meant being good people. Really, like they knew that there's more to being a Christian than that, but because of the generational differences of my parents, there's a lot of just doing good involved in my childhood training, which is necessary for children, of course, but now looking back, I realized I wanted more. I wanted, like, to know why. And to know how as well, because how to be good and why to be good are really big questions that you start thinking about later on when you're going to start making decisions for yourself, like in high school and further on. And because I didn't have a super close, realistic, vulnerable relationship with my parents, I didn't know really why I was supposed to be doing all these things. I just know that I was supposed to be doing them. And so then, later on, when I'm faced with real challenges in my real life and I have to decide whether or not to make a good decision or a bad decision kind of thing, I would always default, because I was a good Christian kid, to making the good decision. Try to as best as I could. Come on, you guys. But it became harder and harder, especially with things that were more and more tempting. And I gained more and more freedom, or was outside of the realm of protection from my parents, or from school, or from good Christian friends and things like that. And so my coming of age story is it's an interesting one. And it mainly revolves around my relationship with my dad. So along with my Christian training, my just normal growing up skills. We grew up we didn't have much money because my dad spent it all sending us to school. So we worked a lot, and there was a lot of us in a very small house, and so we had to expand the house. We were working all the time. And so my dad built the house that we were living in while we were living in it, kind of thing. So we were living in a little 900 square foot house, and we needed more because there were 9 of us. So we added on to that. First, when I was still young and couldn't even help, he built a house in front of that and then subdivided and sold it. He just built it by himself because he's that kind of guy. And then he added on to our house so that we would have more space. So then we moved into that, and then he remodeled the old 900 square feet version that we started in so that it all matched. So that's the kind of guy my dad is. He does all the work himself. He grew up on a farm, blah, blah, blah. He's an engineer, so he kind of knows how to do everything. And so I learned a lot of that stuff growing up. I was working all the time. Whenever we were home from school, on the weekends we were working. We were doing things, we were getting things done. And my dad always had so many things to do that he had to get them done. And he was always, doing something. So I've realized now he was more task-oriented than he was relationship-oriented. And so even though his kids were doing those tasks with him, they weren't really getting to know, I wasn't really getting to know my dad personally, even though I was working with him all the time. And so I was trying to please my dad, but the only way I knew how to do that was to accomplish things for him. And so when I was that right around that coming of age period in my life, like 12 years old, that was my focus in life. I was going to make my dad happy. I was going to please my dad. I was going to be the best son ever. And so I was like my dad's right-hand man the whole time. Everything he needed to do, I was with him. I didn't really care about homework a lot, so, I was able to just help my dad as much as I could because I wanted his approval. And I didn't really get it, which, sounds sad. I'm not looking for pity, but because we're cool now. But he didn't know how to show that at the time. He didn't know what I needed and blah, blah, blah. And so after years of trying so hard to accomplish things to please my dad, and I didn't receive any, affirmation, I gave up. I said, "Oh, screw it. I'm not going to try anymore." And that was, when I was mid-high school or something, like 16 or 17, something, probably 15, 16. I gave up, so I'm not going to really care anymore. But as much as I said that and I did the whole normal teenage rebellion thing, I still yearned for it. And so I would argue with my dad. I'd have these philosophical arguments with him about why he shouldn't be worried about the things he has to get done, and he should be more worried about his relationship with his kids. I would have this talk with him when I was 16. And he was like, "But Kevin, you don't understand. You don't have any responsibilities right now. When you get to be a parent, you have 7 kids and you have all these things, you have so many responsibilities, they have to get done, blah, blah, blah." And he was right to a point. I didn't know what it was like to be an adult. But I had this ideal in my mind. And so even though I said I gave up trying to please him with my actions, I still had that ideal in my heart, and I would have those conversations with him as often as I could, and a lot of times it would end up we still disagreed. And so as I got older and became a responsible adult, that slowly changed. And I think I gained more respect with my dad. Once I gained responsibility and proved kind of that I knew, that I could take responsibility. But now when looking back at that, I want to be different with my kids. I want to help teach them that actively from when they're young, instead of kind of waiting until they can be responsible adults to have a good relationship with them. So that's kind of my quick childhood and parental relationship story. One of the major things that influenced me when I was a kid, other than my parents and my school and my church, was camp. And I started going to these camps called Sequoia Brigade Camp when I was in 6th grade. And I went after the first summer. I was hooked, and I had to keep going back. They're adventure-style camps, so we went out into the mountains and we did canoeing, or mountain biking, or sailing, or backpacking, or all these really cool things. And I loved it. So I was hooked. I kept going back and back and back. When I became 15, then I became a junior counselor. They had a program where when you're between 15 and 18, you could become a junior counselor 3 years in a row. And they have a really cool system. And I know more about this now because I've continued to be involved with them every single year throughout my entire life. So I've been counseling and involved with this camp organization, Sequoia Brigade Camp, ever since I was 15. It's 12 years. And so they have a really cool system where they have senior counselors, which are adult men. This is a camp where camp is mainly focused on boys. There's a few co-ed camps, but it's mainly targeted for young boys. And they have a really great system because they have adult senior counselors. Then they have young adult junior counselors, 15 to 18 years old. And then there's counselors. So there's this intergenerational system built in, which is fantastic, and I am now very, very passionate about, which is why I'm kind of sad that there's no one older than me here right now, because I wish that, because right now we have the two of the three levels. We have, you guys are all about the same age than me, a little bit older. I really love even more wisdom from someone older than me. And so at camp I was significantly influenced by that system, even though I didn't recognize it until later on when I was a counselor. And then becoming a junior counselor and being challenged to fulfill these responsibilities and be a leader to the kids, while still having input and wisdom and safety and oversight from the senior counselors is like an extremely effective system. I was able to learn real leadership skills and go out and be a real leader when I was 16 years old with campers, even though I would make mistakes, because I had senior counselors around to advise me and to help me the whole time. But I was actually being responsible, because like the kids were looking up to me, and I was stepping into that role. And so I've kind of adopted that as my ideal for what I would like to do with my kids, is to have that same kind of thing where I can challenge them to take responsibilities and help them along the way, kind of doing the both thing, instead of expecting them to be responsible but not showing them how, or challenging them, or letting them. So camp is super awesome and has affected me a lot. And through that, I became very, very close with the senior counselors that were there with me over the years. Remember, I went 15, I went when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. I kept going back because I went to junior college after that. And so I was still local and still had summers free. And so I had this long period of time where I got to know the people who were involved long term in camp. So I built really strong relationships with some of the guys who were really involved with that, and they became really strong mentors for me in more ways than just as counselors over the summer. So I gained some extremely strong mentors like multiples of like 3 guys in particular, Bob, Dave, and Dwayne from camp. They're all extremely close friends of mine, even though they're 30 years older than me, you know? And the reason that happened is because of camp and because of the way I was stepping into responsibility while they were kind of guiding that at the same time. So,
What did that mentorship look like?
so it looked like a lot of ways. In particular, one guy, Dave, he's like the closest guy I'm with. He would just interact with me as if I was a real person, as if I was a real adult, as if my opinion mattered. Like, and this was happening when we were counselors too. And so he just had a normal friendship with me, and that's how it started. And then it became deeper and deeper, where he would encourage me to be a better Christian, to help me with my issues, with my problems, with my sin, in different ways than my parents could, because he had a different relationship. So one of the things I've learned now after this is that you can have a lot of help from your parents, and you can have a really good relationship with your parents, but having a good Christian mentor that's not your mom or dad is extremely important, and it's extremely beneficial to me. So we started like going through books together. We had a little book club that we would actually call each other, because he lived out in the valley, and so we would just talk on the phone reading through books together and then talk about it. He would always check up on me, text or Facebook messages whenever I needed it. We just had this open relationship where we could talk about anything and everything without me ever being ashamed of anything. So things that I wouldn't go talk to my dad about, I could talk to my mentor about, which is extremely valuable, because I didn't have that close relationship with my dad in every single area. With the other mentors, I ended up working for one of them doing construction, and that became really awesome. And we, as well as all the really good times that we had over summer camps, doing crazy things week after week, running all these camps. So I gained some really strong mentors. And so those are some of the reasons why in my life these concepts that I now am really passionate about, like intergenerational integration and mentors, the reason why I'm so passionate about those is because they just kind of happened in my life by accident. God organized them to happen that way, to have that much of an effect on my life. And so now I'm really passionate about those, and so that's one of the reasons why I was really excited with this ministry and started with this fellowship, and that's when that was one of the core values of Kyrie, was to have mentors, to have intergenerational integration with the church, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I was so excited about it. As I got older, I started liking girls. Yeah, it's crazy. Revolutionary. And the story of my first girlfriend.
Wait, you weren't liking girls when you were 16?
No, this is, no, probably not.
Wow.
No, I'm sure I was liking girls when I was 16. For guys, you start liking girls, pretty young. Younger and younger nowadays. Younger and younger nowadays. But I wouldn't admit it to myself until later on. And so my first girlfriend was when I was like 18, right at the end of high school. And I wouldn't really call it official until I graduated high school, when I was more like 19, maybe 18 and a half or something like that. Anyways, it just kind of happened. I didn't ask her out. We were just really close friends in high school. And then we just hung out a ton, and finally we said, okay, we're dating. Because I didn't know how to interact with girls. That was one of the things I did not learn from my dad. And so I didn't know how any of that worked. I knew that you weren't supposed to have sex And so, to me, that's all I knew. And so, girls are bad was what like I didn't have the depth or the nuance that you'd learn from a parent who maybe is more open with their previous experiences to teach you, okay, yeah, you're not supposed to have sex, but you are supposed to, like girls, and that's okay, that's normal, that's natural. And so here's how you can kind of work with that and grow up and do things, be real, and find a wife one day because sex isn't bad, it's just bad before you're married. But anyways, so you have to figure all these things out when you're a kid, So my first girlfriend, I didn't know anything except for that sex was bad. And so I was just doing things with my girlfriend and my parents were barely involved. And my mentors were involved a little bit, but not much. So I was just kind of going on my own. And things didn't go very well. And it turned out to be a pretty defining moment in my life because we dated for like 2 years. I was this really good Christian boy, and so I had all these ideals about what a good Christian man, a good Christian husband or boyfriend is supposed to be, just like self-sacrificial love and unconditional love and all these things. And so I was like the perfect boyfriend. Not really. I thought I was. But I was trying to act out that ideal with this girl that I thought I was just completely in love with. I thought I need to love her no matter what, because that's how I felt. I felt really in love with her. And so as we got older and had less, supervision, blah, 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 we started doing things, and I didn't know any of the nuances of that. And so in my attempt to be the perfect boyfriend, my attempt was also to make her happy, to please her as much as I could. And so I would defer to all the things, what do you want to do? And I would always just do what she wanted to do. And I got really good at just deferring. And I thought that was self-sacrifice, that was unconditional love, just doing what she wanted to do. And it's not true. So, but I didn't know that. And in the end, it turns out to be really bad. But I'll get there. So we, we're getting closer and closer and closer. And as young adults without much supervision or real knowledge or real boundaries, real experience, we just kept doing things more and more what we wanted. And, I was doing things that I wanted too. And so it felt really good to make out, it felt really good to do all those things. And so all I knew was that we weren't supposed to have sex. And so we just kept going further and further and further physically as we kept going further and further and further emotionally and with time. And so it just crept up on me, and because I didn't set any boundaries, because I didn't really know any better, it crept up on me. Even though I really did know better, I should have known better. I knew the whole time, this probably isn't right, but it felt really good, and so we kept going. And so we kept getting further and further physically, to the point where this is when I'm like 20, 21 now.
Oh, you guys go pretty slow. Most people.
We did go slow-ish. I mean, over the 2 years, we progressed. Probably over a year, and then over a year and a half. And so this is the point in my life where I have a lot of freedom. I'm driving around. I got a little job. I'm going to junior college, and we just keep going further and further physically. She has her own place, little apartment. She had a really, really bad home life, abused by her dad, had to work since she was like 12 to help support the family, et cetera, et cetera. So she had a really poor home life, and so I was like a huge support for her. Anyways, we kept going further and further until the point where we basically did everything physically that you can except for have sex, which is a lot. A lot. And it's not good. But I really liked it, and so, we kept going. But I knew I wasn't supposed to actually have sex, and so I was able to stop there, which is a really great rule. Doesn't make any sense. But I didn't, that's where I was at the time. And so, through all of that, through my misconception of what sacrificial love was and unconditional love, and my lack of boundaries and all of this, I really idolized, turned her into an idol. And I really just worshipped her. I did everything for her. She went off to college. I would go visit her all the time. I would pay for her plane tickets, like all of this really unhealthy stuff. But because I didn't know any better, and I didn't have any mentors really speaking into my relationship in a real way, because I wouldn't tell them things that I didn't want to tell them, that I was ashamed of. And so that all blew up in my face when one summer when I was probably 20 or 21, and she got pregnant, and she told me that she was pregnant, and I was like, we didn't have sex, so you are pregnant. And she said, yeah, I'm a month in, so she didn't tell me for a month.
Wait, what?
Yeah, she slept with one of my friends, and yeah, slept with one of my friends, and one of our mutual friends, and got pregnant, and didn't tell me for a month. She was really ashamed, like, she thought she had all these, issues, of course. Anyways, that was a big deal. That was the first time I really seriously talked to someone else about my relationship with my girlfriend. After 2 years, like, it took her getting pregnant for me to talk really with someone wiser, older and wiser than me about my girlfriend, about our relationship. Because I was oblivious and I thought I had it under control. So that's when I first started talking and to some of my mentors. My initial thought was, I'm going to be self-sacrificing and love unconditionally, so I don't think you should marry that guy. And so, maybe maybe we'll get married, maybe blah, blah, blah. I had all these crazy thoughts going through my head because I worshipped her. But I talked to luckily I finally talked to some of my mentors because of that big event. So I talked to my older brother, I talked to my pastor at the time, who was another one of my close mentors. And they all told me the same thing: get out, get away from her, cut it off, be done. It's all bad. And so I did reluctantly. It was really, really tough, but I broke up with her and said, for both of our good, we need to not be involved anymore. And so, that trailed on for a little bit of time, and it was heartbreaking, but it was an awakening at the same time, because, like I said, that was the thing that really caused me to say, look, I need help. I need to talk to people who know more than I do about the crap that I'm dealing with, about the issues that I'm having, about the problems that I don't know how to solve, about all the things that I'm ashamed of in my life, really. And that's what mentors are for, because they don't judge. To my surprise, none of the mentors none of the people I talked to about these things condemned me or judged me. when I told them that we did everything that you could except for have sex, they didn't say, you're going to hell or you're a bad Christian. It was a loving rebuke. It was accepting me where I was and telling me lovingly why I should be different and how I can be different. And so I realized, like, I can be vulnerable with my mentors, and I should be vulnerable with my mentors, and that's extremely valuable. And that's what I really wanted from my dad, is to be vulnerable with him, for him to be vulnerable with me, and for me to learn the real life lessons from him instead of learning them myself later on with my first girlfriend. But that's how it happened, and that's how I gained a lot of mentors, because I then, after that, seeked out mentors. And so that's when those camp mentors got really close with them during that time in my life. And so that's why I'm super passionate about mentorship. So then I didn't date anyone for a long time because I was scared, which is okay, I guess. But anyways, after that, I went to college when I was like 23. I went to junior college when I was younger than that, so I spent 3 years in junior college. Don't worry, you guys are on the right track. You're doing way better than I did. I spent 3 years in junior college, then took a year off because I applied to transfer too late. I missed the deadline, and so I ended up going to Cal Poly when I was 23, transferring to Cal Poly when I was 23. Most people graduate from college when they're 22 or 23, right? How old are you guys?
20.
20, yeah. 22? Yeah, see, and are you a senior? Yeah. How many seniors? We'll get to that later. Okay, good. We got some good juicy stuff for you guys. So I transferred to Cal Poly when I was 23, and I was 3 years older than everyone else in my same classes. So I felt really a bit out of place. Yeah, I wasn't the oldest guy in the world, but there were some people older, but not too many. Anyways, there was another transfer student who was my age, so I was happy with that. Cal Poly, at junior college, I got a little bit of design. I'm a graphic designer. I was interested in graphic design at the time. And so I got a little bit of experience when I was in junior college. But then when I transferred to Cal Poly, it was a whole new world. It was so intense. And so I was super busy the whole time. Let me look at my outline real quick. Super busy. And I didn't really know the industry. I didn't know how real college worked. I didn't know a lot of things. I was just a young kid. And so I spent my whole first year at Cal Poly just doing school as I normally did, which is doing what the teachers told me, doing my assignments, and I was trying to learn as much as I could and trying to fit, into the mold. But I've realized now later on, after my 2 years at Cal Poly and then graduating and looking back, I've realized that that is stupid. That's quite stupid, but it's not the best thing you can do for yourself in college. So this is some of the practical advice I have. In my outline, I had childhood and parents and a couple subpoints. Then I had camp and mentors and a couple subpoints. Then I had first girlfriend, a couple subpoints. Now I have college, a couple subpoints. And then I have career and a couple subpoints. So college and job, this is really fun stuff I like talking about, that I'm passionate about. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. We're going to get into some fun stuff here. So I hate the educational system in America.
Dang!
That's a lot of hate.
And sitting in classrooms and doing what your teacher tells you and memorizing things and taking tests, a lot of times you don't really learn, or you learn it and then you forget. That's why this show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, exists. Because all the adults, the majority of adults, don't remember what they learned in 5th grade. So the fifth graders who are just memorizing it know a lot more about geography, for example, than a lot of normal adults. So I hate the educational system. And so even though you're in the system, I want you to be encouraged because you can beat it. You can beat the system. What high school and your early years of college should be about is exposure. You should be learning about all of the wide, wonderful things there are in the world and figuring out which ones you like. So when I went to Cal Poly, I found out that there were these other things. Like, I found out what architecture really was like because I had a roommate who was an architecture student. And I was like, wow, that's actually really interesting. I didn't know anything about what architects really do. I always thought it was boring, but actually that's really interesting. And that is a failure of the education system because I should have known at that point in my life what architects really did because I should have known whether or not I wanted to be an architect. Does that make sense? Like, that's what high school and junior college or like the first two years of school should be, is exposing you to everything. Yeah. Exposing you to everything so that you know what you want to do with your life. Like, that's what education should be, and they try to, but it's so standardized now that we lose a lot of it. So it should inspire you. You should be excited about biology because that's interesting to you. Or if you don't like biology, that's fine. You should be inspired about physics or whatever you're interested about. Like, everyone has interests, okay? So school should be about finding those things. Teaching you general skills, of course. Okay, I'm ranting. Anyways, exposure. So I realized after like 2/3 of the way through my first year of school, we had a review, like a junior year. I was like technically a junior. So we had a junior review. And my teachers reviewed my portfolio at the time, my coursework, my best design at the time. And they told me, that I wasn't experimental enough, and they told me all these things. And I realized that I was spending all my effort trying to do what the assignment told me to do. And so I wasn't doing very good work because I was focused so much on the requirements and trying to do exactly what my teacher wanted from the assignment. Whereas instead, I should take the assignment and go way further than what the teacher wants or expects. I should take the concept and I should say, what if we do this and this and this and this on top of it? How does this project fit into the real world? What would it actually look like? How can I make it even better than what the teacher is expecting from the students? And so I realized, okay, I'm going to start breaking some of the rules, breaking some of the requirements, going above and beyond what my teachers want from my assignments. And that's when I started really learning and really doing semi-decent work in college. Is when I started breaking the rules and started doing things more. Stopped focusing so much on trying to fit with exactly what my teachers wanted. Because teachers, they're forced into that system, so they have to kind of create that. It's not all the teachers' fault. Some teachers are really good at inspiring their students to go above and beyond, but most have to fit into this standardized system where they're getting evaluated based on how well their students are doing, et cetera, et cetera. So they have to have measurable ways to evaluate that, so they have to have tests, and they have to have, requirements, and they have to have guidelines for you to fit. And so if you're doing this well, then they're a good teacher and they're producing good students. But are you really learning enough to be a really good adult or a really good, future worker in your career? I think we can do better. And so, in college, you will get out of it as much as you put into it. This is my rant for all college kids. My advice is find out what you want from college and go get it yourself, because the teachers are not going to give it to you. Does that make sense, you seniors? Are you nodding? Okay. Because your teachers are not going to spoon feed it to you. And even if, and students are realizing this across the nation, graduates are realizing this across the country, that now when you graduate and you've fulfilled all the requirements for your teachers and all your classes, and you get your degree and you try to get a job and no one hires you. Why? Because you suck at your job, probably. Why? Because college sucks at teaching you how to be good at your job. Okay? So, you need to figure out how to be good at your job. Your teachers are not going to tell you, unless they're a really good teacher and they understand that. Some of them are. You know those teachers. You know the ones who are really passionate and really want you to succeed, and so they help you learn more about what the real world is like, and not what the test, not what is on the test. Okay? You don't very often have tests in your career. You just have to do good work. And if you don't know something in your job, you learn it. Like, there's a lot of things I've learned in the past 2 years I didn't learn in school, and that's fine. Because I had to on the job. That's how the real world works. You don't learn everything in school and then now you are qualified and you are going to do exactly what you learned in school. That's not how it works at all. The world keeps moving, things keep innovating. You are going to be learning if you're a good human being. The rest of your life. And so to get enough out of college to really jump right into your career, you have to go after it yourself. Because again, the teachers aren't going to give it to you. So one of the things that just blew my mind and opened me up to all the possibilities was all the things I saw going on at Cal Poly. Cal Poly is really good at, that's their motto, is learn by doing, and so they try as much as they can to have real world projects in the classroom. So they teach their students how to do things by actually doing them. And so I saw a bunch of engineering students building racing carts and full on what's the word? Yeah, not go-karts, but the rally cars. My engineering students building rally cars from scratch. And I saw other engineering students building aircraft from scratch, and I saw other people building the float that they do at the Rose Parade, and I saw architects' actual projects up on the hillside. They have all these projects from years past, all these buildings that are just on the hillside that are student projects from years and years and years and years. And I was like, they actually build these things in college. And I saw that they had every single different department had their own workshop where students were doing real projects. And so I was opened up to all these things, that I didn't know about existed. Industrial technology is one of these things I'm really interested in. Does anyone know what it is?
Technology.
Industrial technology, industrial engineering, yeah. Industrial design, yeah. So you guys are sophomores or juniors in college. You should have the exposure to all of these things, but schools are really bad at doing that. If I had known that the field of industrial technology or industrial engineering, you're designing physical products. So a lot of times that's plastics, synthetic materials. There's a lot of natural materials as well. So, but you're doing a lot of mold making. It's you are designing how things get made, how all of the products really in the world get made. They're designed usually by engineers and industrial engineers, industrial designers. So anyways, sorry for that if you're not interested in industrial. But anyways, I realized these things that I didn't know existed in school, but it was too late. Now, luckily, I am really interested in you're doing a lot of mold making. It's you are designing how things get made. how all of the products really in the world get made. They're designed usually by engineers and industrial engineers, industrial designers. So anyway, sorry for that, if you're not interested. But anyways, I realized these things that I didn't know existed in school, but it was too late. Now, luckily, I am really interested in graphic design, so that's cool, and I'm happy. But I should have had more exposure when I was younger. And so that's not going to happen if you guys don't go out and get it. I wish that school did that in high school and in the first couple of years of college, but it doesn't really. And so you kind of have to seek it out for yourself. And so that's what I did. I was like, oh, this cool stuff exists. I'm going to, even though I have a super busy schedule, try to fill in as much as I can in other departments. So I started taking some engineering classes, even though I'm a graphic designer. And I'm taking mostly art classes. Any artists? No? So we have, who has a bio major? Who's bio? Okay, who's a psych major? Okay, what are the other big ones? Oh, computer science. Who's computer science? Business? Who's business? Econ?
What if you're a mix of computer science and business?
That's fine. Good. That's a good combination. There's some really cool combinations.
Where that didn't crack.
One of my good friends
Should I have a speaker? Should I have a speaker? My phone. No.
So anyway, I started taking a bunch of classes in these different
Same. I did the same thing.
different degrees, as many as I could, and little things that I was interested in. So I took a welding class, and I took, even though it had nothing to do with graphic design, and I took a costume design class in the theater department because it was awesome, and I loved so many things. It's really fun. And I was really interested in set design because I was really interested in physical design. That's why I'm interested in industrial technology. We did a collaborative project with industrial design. I got really interested in all of the architecture projects. So whenever there was an architecture event going on, I would go and see all the different architect students' projects and ask them about how they did that, and the software that they use, and their models, and how, and so I started getting interested in all these things and going out and doing this, and none of my teachers were telling me to do this. It's just because I finally got that exposure, and it awoke some of these passions in me that I didn't know existed, because I didn't know that those things existed. And so exposure. You should find out what's out there, and then go for it, and go figure out what it's like. And the last little sub-point in my college point is professional preparation. So college should be preparing you. That's the whole point of college, should be preparing you for your career, for your professional life. And so, especially in your junior and senior year, you should be really focused on what it is going to be like once you get out of college and how to prepare yourself for that. And so, and that's what I tried to do, and now what I've realized is even more important for especially your senior year. You should be taking whatever assignment your teacher has given you and saying, what would this really look like in the real world? And how can I make my project look like that and make it even better than what the teacher expects? Take all your projects and say, if this was a real world thing, what are all the different considerations? Find as many opportunities as you can to learn all those things about your career outside of the classroom as you can, because your teachers aren't going to really tell you a ton inside your classroom. You're going to have to usually learn those things with your own initiative, going out, finding those clubs where those engineering students are building a real rally car because they want to be engineers that build rally cars. And so their teachers didn't assign them to build it. they started a club, like Kyrie, slightly different, and they started building things because that's what they wanted to do in their professional life, and so they decided to do it in reality. And that means that then once they would graduate, they're extremely valuable to employers because they know how to do real things for their employer. They don't just know how to take tests and study, you know? Because that's not really what workers do, unless you're like a researcher or, you know, a librarian or, you know, something, which is cool. So if you're in a research field, then find out what a professional researcher really does and expose yourself to those things and start learning from that instead of just from your teachers. And doing those things and making all of your projects as best you can to be what the professional projects really look like. For you psychology majors or biology, find out what real professional biologists are doing in the field that you're interested in, maybe, because there's a lot of fields in biology or psychology or economics. Whatever field you're in, like, find out what you're interested in, look at what real professionals are doing, and try to do those things for your projects in your classrooms, and your teachers will love you. Like, even if you break the rules. So when I started doing this and started breaking the rules in my assignments, I like got C's in the class, but my teachers loved me, and they were recommending me to, like, you know, to do different things because they knew they were excited about what I was doing, even though it wasn't what the assignment said to do, exactly, because they knew really it was better. And so the reason I got C's is because I didn't finish them. They were too big because I kept adding more and more. Well, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And so I did, my senior year, when I majored graphic design classes, I didn't finish any of the 3 huge projects. So a couple of them I still haven't finished. But my teachers loved me. There were, in my senior year, there started to be events that I would go to, like, and get extra work for myself. What student wants extra work? Well, if it's the work that's actually teaching you what's going to be good for your career. So there were hackathons, like there was a hackathon that Evernote put on, where the engineering students, you know, computer science students and designers would team up and create an app overnight, 24 hours hackathon. This is not an assignment. It's not anything. It's what you're interested in, and it's what real professional designers and what real professional computer scientists do. They create apps. So if you're a computer science major and you're interested in creating apps, don't just do the assignments that your teachers give you. Find the cool apps that you love and start designing stuff and actually make them. You can do it when you're in school. You can't. And that is way more valuable in school while you're in college to learn than what most of your teachers will assign you. Is any of this applicable for you guys in your majors, or is this all kind of stupid?
Just to, like, not really answering your question, but just asking a question. But how does all of this kind of how do we incorporate this into our Christian life?
Great question. Yeah, this is all part of my testimony because I've become passionate about these things, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm here and I want to invest in you guys, is because I'm passionate about, like, the education system and blah blah blah. How to apply these things to our Christian life is this is probably the same thing in a certain regard to, like, church or Christian fellowships like Kyrie. If you really want to be like Christ, what does that mean? Does that mean doing your assignments of going to church and going to Kyrie and reading your Bible? Or does that mean, you know, everything you do is glorifying to God. And so that's how I would kind of compare the two, is that just how similar to how in your professional life, where you're learning how to become a professional, you need to go above and beyond and find out what real life is like instead of just meeting the requirements. Same thing in your faith. Like, we should be passionate about knowing Christ. You know, it's hard to be, but we should be passionate, and we are sometimes, right? When something experience happens and we see that God is real, we see God's blessing in our life, or we see God's hand, we get passionate and we want to know Him more, but then we just kind of come back and focus on ourselves. And so when we're passionate about knowing Christ, we do things differently than normal, right? We don't just keep going to church and just, we are constantly thinking about those things, and we're constantly praying and reading more and being interested in asking questions, and so just being passionate like that, because in life, being a Christian isn't something you do when you're in church. It's not something you do just by yourself in your bedroom with God when you're praying. It is your identity. It's how you live your whole life. And so, what is a Christian supposed to do? What is it like? A Christian's supposed to glorify God in everything he does, including your professional career, including your assignments. What's up?
It was a question like after.
Oh,
Yeah.
including your assignments, including your, so glorifying God. You can glorify God when you're studying. Like, you can glorify God in your thoughts, your words, and your actions, no matter what you're doing. And right now, you guys are called to be students and to be learning how to become professionals. And so you can be glorifying God in those ways. And at the same time, then, your life should be an example to those who do not have faith to come to the same faith, which leads them to then glorifying God with their life. So glorifying God and evangelizing, those are the big ones. And you can do those without being a missionary. You can do those while you're in school. You can do those all the time, just by how you live. Are you bearing fruit? Are you glorifying God? And hopefully, are you being a good example?
Are we transitioning into question and answer time, or
Probably.
did you have lost thoughts?
Yeah,
Yeah?
kind of, because this is all
Career oriented.
My last section was just jobs and what it means to work instead of be in school, which is really cool.
You want to finish that thought? Or I have something to add to that thought.
Yeah.
This is kind of scattered. I like it. Something I've been learning, which is interesting that we're bringing this up, is I think the question you're kind of trying to ask is why are you talking about what you're passionate about? And I think in our culture or whatever, it seems like it's bad to be like, oh, I like basketball. And it's like, no, you don't like basketball, you like Jesus. And the two things are separate or something.
Yeah.
And I think what Kevin's trying to say, and what I feel like God's teaching me in my life, is he chooses the word satisfied. My spiritual director uses the word satisfied, or uses the word passionate. My spiritual director uses the word satisfied, and I use the word fruitful. And all that really means is, what are you designed to do? What are you created to do? And we're all created in God's image, and so sometimes we like creating things that glorify Him, and I think that was the point he was trying to make. But it all looks different, it doesn't mean I'm a graphic designer like him. I could be a doctor, and that's me glorifying God in my vocation. It's doing what you're passionate about or satisfied in, or what's fruitful in your life. And that, I think his point was that it sucks because you're limited in discovering what you're gifted in and who God created you to be, because our education system kind of trains us to study or trains us to take tests, but not really exposes us to the beauty in the world so that we can discover what God created us to do.
Absolutely. Hopefully I was communicating that God, and I've ranted about this before, I think, when I went off on my little rants, that God created everything in this world. He created computers. He created technology. He created electricity. He created human biology, tissues. He created the human mind, psychology. He created the concept of numbers and math and currency and economics. He created everything. And He wants us to enjoy His creation and glorify God. The catechism, glorify God and enjoy Him forever. He created all these things good. We should be glorifying Him while we're enjoying Him. Does that make sense?
It's a foreign concept.
Yeah, Christians are not called to deny creation, to forget about everything except for evangelizing and glorifying God. No, we're to glorify God and evangelize while we're doing everything there is in creation. I'm not going to do every single thing there is in creation. I wish. I'm really interested in every single thing there is in creation. And I wish I would be a really awesome painter, and I wish I was really good at fixing cars, and I wish I was really good at all these things. I can't do all those things, but I can glorify God in all the things I do, even if they're not a quote-unquote Christian activity. Fixing my car is not what I learn about in church. But I can glorify God while I'm fixing my car, especially if I have someone with me helping me fix my car, or I'm helping someone else fix their car, and I am being a good example to them, and I'm building a relationship with them, and I am being Christ-like with them while I'm doing that, etc., etc. And even if I'm not, if I am enjoying God's creation and glorifying Him by enjoying that creation in the right mindset, then that is glorifying to God, even though fixing my car or taking a hike or whatever is not a Christian activity. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Sorry, you actually answered a third of my question, so I don't know if it's my question. Basically, for me as a senior, especially within computer science, especially within the whole product development, I realized that a good amount, like you said, a good amount of my own personal dreams and passions had been crushed by the education system. Had to crush you talking about this with my friends, so that definitely struck a chord. But in terms of just parts of your life which you know you have passion for, but you literally, I literally live in school. I literally live in an area and an atmosphere where that crushes it. And so it's either, I think there are two paths from there. Well, three. First is give up. Second is consistently every single day try to struggle your way through and just eke out a living, which I feel like is what happens to a lot of college students. And third is to find your passion and blow through it. And so for you personally, how did that apply to you? How is it that you were able to, for you personally, how did you find your passion in such a way that it just blew through all the whole educational crap, and you're able to really start living out as the person, living out the passions that God placed in you?
Yeah. A lot of it was the exposure thing. When I found out what the architecture students were doing, when I found out that they had a lab with laser cutters and 3D routers that I could go use. I didn't know. My teachers didn't tell me, but I found out.
Wait, sorry, have you seen a wind tunnel made out of straws?
No.
You have a wind tunnel made completely out of straws.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Yeah, I found out Cal Poly has a real wind tunnel where their aerospace engineering students build aircraft and test them while they're in college. How awesome is that? So a lot of it was the school I went to, and they encouraged that a lot. But you guys can do that too, or even if it's not out there, you can go do it yourself. You can start those clubs that are doing those things. You can get in touch with the companies, the professional companies that you would like to work for, and have them host events on campus. You can do that. You can change the way you learn. Yeah, you can change the way your college operates. And one of the best ways to do this, you have to ask. I didn't know. I asked, I want to do this. How can I do this? And I asked the lab tech in our workshop. And that's when I found out about the architecture workshop and all the different equipment that they had in there. And so asking your teachers the questions that they, don't tell you about normally, asking your teachers about what your profession actually looks like, et cetera, that's a good start. And then doing more and more research on your own, and you guys can make those contacts and make those things happen even while you're in school.
Okay.
So in the beginning, when you were 16 years old, or 15%, you were talking about how you had responsibilities, which is why it was like a perfect system, because you have mentors, you have responsibilities, and they talk to you about your responsibilities.
Yeah.
And then you emphasize how it's really good to have mentors. So as college students, I'm thinking our biggest responsibility is school, and I feel like I don't really need to talk to a mentor for school. Because I know that I should relax, I know to do my work. It's since that's our main responsibility, how should we ever connect to mentors? That makes sense.
Yeah, well, you should have, because school is kind of slightly separate from your personal development, your personal life, and your psyche and the issues that you're dealing with, and your relationship with God, and et cetera, all these things. So, your teachers, and hopefully more than that, the resources that you have at school should be your mentors for your professional life. But then you should also have mentors for your personal life and for your Christian walk too, because this stage of life is where you always need them, but this stage in life is in particular where you really need them, because you're becoming adults, and you will soon have spouses and wives, spouses and children. I'm just thinking about a wife. You'll have spouses and children that you'll need to be you will end up becoming a mentor. What kind of parent are you going to be? That you should be as passionate as I am about being a good designer, or doing what God has for me, using my design skills. I should be as passionate about being a good father as well, even though I don't have kids right now, because I want to have kids. And how, like, if I'm applying the same amount of passion to that, then I need mentors, because otherwise how will I know what a good father is, and how to be a good father, and how to be a good Christian man? How, like, one of the things I've struggled with in my Christian walk is how, because of that relationship I had with my dad, where things were based on accomplishments, like, how do I become a responsible adult man and also be a child of God that trusts Him and doesn't rely on my own strength? Because in this world, like, men are called to be strong and be responsible, and as children of God, we're called to rely on Him and be humble. You know, how does that fit together? And I need help with that, and so I need mentors. I need to work through my sin. The only way I can work through my sin is if I'm vulnerable with someone who isn't going to shame me for it. You know? And mentors are those people. And it's really hard to kind of explain that until you experience it. That's why I'm so passionate about it, and that's why I will, like, say that with such fervor, especially, you know, the professional career and with mentorship and with intergenerational worship and things like that, is because I experienced it and I know how much it affected my life. And I would be a completely different person if God hadn't led me to that specific camp with those mentors and influenced my life in those ways. I think we're running out of time, so I am always available to talk if you guys have more questions. And I know that was probably a bit of an odd testimony, turned into more like, be really cool at school. But that's one of the things I'm really passionate about. It's actually like part of who I am. So, anyway, thanks for listening, guys. I hope you know a little better. Again, you can ask me any questions all the time. So let's pray. Lord, thank you for these students who are dedicated enough to spend their Wednesday nights coming to Christian fellowship. I pray that you will give them passion for the things in their life that you want to do, that the things in their life that your will for them, that you would open up those opportunities for them while they're in school here, for those that path in their life, but also that you will open up those opportunities and create that passion in them to become closer to you and to find mentors and to find out what it really means to be like Christ, but human on this earth. Thank you for all the resources you've given me in particular, and this group, including Joe and Jason and our churches and all the other wise people in our churches, and all the friends that we can have relationships with and build each other up. Thank you for the opportunity to do that and to get closer to you through those things. I pray that we will be, that you will bring us closer to you throughout the rest of this quarter, learning about each other and all the other testimonies that we will hear throughout this quarter. In Jesus' name. Amen.